5 Chelsea players in firing line as Enzo Maresca launches internal investigation. Enzo Maresca will address his side's disciplinary problems this summer. There will be a quarter of Chelsea stars sweating this summer when manager Enzo Maresca launches an investigation into his team's poor disciplinary record. Following this month's 2-0 defeat at Newcastle, during which Nicolas Jackson was sent off, the Italian confirmed he would be looking into the problem. The Senegalese striker needlessly struck Newcastle defender Sven Botman in the face with his right elbow. The incident left the Blues without an out-and-out striker for the 1-0 win over Manchester United last Friday, and Jackson will also miss Sunday's pivotal clash with Nottingham Forest. Although it was only Chelsea's second dismissal of the season, the club have picked up 84 yellow cards in the Premier League. Under the Premier League regulations, players who receive 10 cautions before the 32-match mark get a 2-match suspension. Caicedo reached that number against Ipswich, Chelsea's 32nd league match of the campaign, so he avoided the ban. Defender Levi Colwill has been booked on 9 occasions. Marc Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez, and Pedro Neto have been given 8 yellow cards each, and those 4 players are likely to join Caicedo in featuring heavily in Maresca's review. When revealing his planned investigation, the ex-Leicester boss denied that inexperience in his squad was an excuse, saying, "For me, it's not about the age. No matter the age, if you make a mistake, it is okay because we all make mistakes." Moises Caicedo has 10 yellow cards this season. Defender Levi Colwill has been booked on 9 occasions. Marc Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez, and Pedro Neto have been given 8 yellow cards each, and those 4 players are likely to join Caicedo in featuring heavily in Maresca's review. When revealing his planned investigation, the ex-Leicester boss denied that inexperience in his squad was an excuse, saying, "For me, it's not about the age. No matter the age, if you make a mistake, it is okay because we all make mistakes. But if you make the same mistake again, then it is probably not the best. During the summer, we need to see and review things." Maresca will need his side to keep their composure for 2 games, which will now define their season. Victory against Forest will guarantee Champions League qualification, before a Europa Conference League final against Real Betis in Poland 3 days later. Mo Salah breaks the internet with reaction to Spurs beating Man United to win Europa League. Mo Salah had an instant internet-breaking reaction to Spurs beating Manchester United in the Europa League final on Thursday night. Spurs went into the game having tasted victory over United on 3 occasions this season but went one better with a 4th on the big stage in Bilbao. Brennan Johnson scored the only goal of a scrappy game to finally end Spurs' 17-year trophy drought and secure qualification for next season's Champions League. There was a feeling of pure euphoria amongst Spurs fans and players, while Ange Postecoglou was full of emotion after a difficult period was capped off with a trophy. The Australian had repeatedly said that he always wins silverware in his second season and did so in his 100th game in charge of Spurs. And after the full-time whistle was blown, Liverpool star Mo Salah, a scorer against Spurs in the 2019 Champions League final in Madrid, brought up that now iconic comment as he congratulated the North London outfit. On his official X account, Salah wrote, "He did say he'd win in his second season. Congratulations!" Salah's post was met by many responses by Liverpool supporters, who felt he knew exactly what he was doing. Tottenham beat Man United to win Europa League and end trophy drought. Postecoglou has ended Tottenham's trophy drought. Tottenham Hotspur have beaten Manchester United 1-0 in the Europa League final at the Estadio San Mamés in Bilbao. Spurs' victory ends a 17-year wait for another piece of silverware after their 2008 EFL Cup win. It also confirms the club's participation in the Champions League next season. The only goal of the match was scored just before the half-time break, when Brennan Johnson guided the ball into the back of Man United's net. Spurs' triumph is notable as, next season, they will become the first Premier League club to finish outside the top 10 and then play in the Champions League. This win-or-bust clash between 2 heavily maligned English giants offered a golden ticket to the UCL, despite their truly atrocious domestic form. Johnson's breakthrough was the 31st time that the Red Devils had conceded the opening goal in a match this season, the most of any Premier League club across all competitions. It was the latest damning statistic for Ruben Amorim's men, but they looked to change the narrative when Rasmus Højlund headed over from Ahmad's cross. Tottenham's defending hardly inspired much confidence, with Guglielmo Vicario just about managing to thwart Laney Euro from Bruno Fernandes' set piece. The North Londoners were holding on to their slender lead by the skin of their teeth when Vicario failed to collect a routine free kick from Fernandes, but he was bailed out by Mickey van der Ven's stunning acrobatic clearance of Haaland's header. United continued to look the more likely side to strike next, and Fernandes should have done much better when his diving header went wide from Nasser Mazroui's cross. Amorim introduced Alejandro Garnacho as part of a double change with Joshua Zirkzee, with the former almost making an immediate impact after forcing Vicario into a fine one-handed save. Ultimately, it was to be Tottenham's night, as Postecoglou's players earned a piece of silverware that more gifted Spurs teams during Mauricio Pochettino's exciting tenure failed to deliver. It was a fine way for the Australian to mark his 100th match in charge, as Spurs achieved their 150th victory in European competition. Meanwhile, United's unbeaten UEL run ends in their 15th and final game in this competition, as the inquest into the club's disastrous campaign begins. Ruben Amorim must face scrutiny as key decision costs Manchester United dear in Europa League final. Tottenham 1-0 Manchester United. Brennan Johnson's scrambled goal in the first half sees Spurs end their trophy drought and earn a Champions League place, while the nightmare gets worse for Ruben Amorim. For the entire duration of a nerve-addled Europa League final, Ruben Amorim barely stood still. He probably covered more ground than Casemiro. And he did not know whether to have his hands in his pockets or out. In fact, Amorim's anxiety was a tone-setter for a match that barely featured a confident passage of play from either side. Amorim always cuts an obsessed figure in and around the technical area, but this was different level. And quite frankly, his uncertainty, his change of game plan, leaving Alejandro Garnacho on the bench, was one of the key factors in this excruciating defeat for Manchester United. Amorim has been afforded considerable benefit of the doubt since his appointment at Old Trafford, but this cannot be dressed as anything other than a failure on his part. Let's put it this way, if Sir Jim Ratcliffe's brains trust does not have a thorough inquiry into this loss against a very average Spurs side, it is not doing its job. Of course, Amorim needs better players, as do Spurs, and this match was glaring evidence of that. As far as the atmosphere inside a wonderful stadium goes, this occasion lived up to the pre-match billing. As far as the standard of football expected from two teams who have lost a combined 39 Premier League matches this season, this occasion also lived down to its billing. The 40 minutes that preceded a suitably ugly opening goal were not bad, they were spectacularly bad. Nerves? Perhaps. But as well as being a reflection of their standing in the English game right now, it was a luminous illustration of the challenges that lie ahead for both clubs. In terms of truly elite football, they have fallen off a cliff, and scaling their way back towards the top is a seriously arduous task. Amorim was a bag of nerves on the touchline. It really is hard to describe how poor the first half of this match was. It was a litany of misplaced passes, clumsy fouls, shanked crosses, bad decisions and thoughtless attacking. It was dire. It probably did not help that both managers had been a little conservative in their team selections and setups, but even so, the failure to be able to do the basics correctly was startling. And most of us knew how poor these teams were. In United's case, this was indeed further evidence that the level of squad overhaul needed is extremely high. But one player who will be a big asset going forward is Amad Diallo. For good portions of this match, he was the only player worth watching, a player with both the attitude and technique that can make things happen. To be fair to Spurs, they were missing a couple of players who have that same mindset, but they were still surprisingly afraid to commit men forward. Brennan Johnson scores Tottenham's winner. And that fear was only heightened by Brennan Johnson's goal. With a nod to Ange Postecoglou's famous soundbite, "It certainly wasn't who they are, mate." To sit so deep was a risk, but apart from one dramatic Mickey van der Ven clearance, they rarely looked in truly serious danger of conceding a goal that would have taken the final into extra time. And that is because United were frantic and lacking calmness and composure. They had taken their lead from their manager, and it cost them dear.